All right, we're live. Welcome everybody to another DoneJS contributors meeting. I'm your host with the most, Justin Meyer. With me is Sheriff.
Hi, I'm Sheriff from Algeria.
With that sweet DoneJS t-shirt on. Matthew, how are you doing?
Hello, doing well.
And with the even more formal DoneJS attire, there's Kevin with his sweatshirt.
Hey everybody.
How's it going? I just realized I forgot to share this with in Batobi's general room. This hangout in front of you guys can do that for me while I'm entertaining.
Do that.
So
sorry. Halloween is like next week, so we have a tradition of doing costumes. Do we do that next Friday? Obviously, it's too late. Well, no, we can't do it. Shoot, it's too late. Sorry.
We can do it next Friday. We can do a short one, maybe.
Maybe.
We do have a tradition of wearing Halloween costumes, so maybe we'll do it next week. We should have done it. We should have thought about that a little earlier. It's my fault, but we'll do a makeup on Friday. Maybe. Okay, so we have a good meeting planned today for everybody. So we are going. I'm gonna talk about the new what's in CanJS 5.15 that was released. I'm also going to talk about this Crud and this crud demo that I made. Matthew's going to show some, it wasn't SSR bugs, but it was Steel Clone issues that he fixed. And then Kevin is going to show off some new changes to the dev tools. And then Sheriff's going to talk about how he's making IE 11 work in CanJS 4 and 5. So I'm going to get started and talk about what's in CanJS 5.15. So CanJS 5.15 adds an or, and, or not helpers. There was a not helper already in CanStash converters. This has been moved into CanJS directly. And these do pretty much the JavaScript equivalents. They do the same kind of lazy evaluation as well, like or and do. But they're called as functions, and they can be nested like this. So yeah, so this is like if the user is not an admin or a super admin, you would render what's in here. One also interesting thing is these things can be used directly. So you can actually just put an and straight away inside an expression as well. And in some ways this actually, and it can even use one, in some ways and is actually just like if. If we really wanted to be very minimalist, we could just get rid of the if, and people would just use and everywhere, but I feel like that would read weird. But and with just one thing is equivalent of if. The next thing that it does is improves CanStash is docs. That's something that I've been working on. It's much more use case based, which I think will help people learn it much easier and know how to find ways of doing things that Stash provides. The one important thing is to note is that I've deprecated a lot of old helpers. This doesn't mean that they're going away. It does mean that there are new, better ways of doing all of these things. The most critical things I would say that are deprecated are helper expressions. This is where you had some kind of method and you would call it like this. This is very standard handlebars way of calling things. We prefer call expressions now. And partials. Partials have been deprecated because you really don't need this syntax anymore, because you can simply call, and there's a whole section creating partials. You can simply call stash functions now directly, like how you would call a function. And if you wanted backwards compatibility, where previously maybe you had something like partial, and that would render with the scope at the current spot. Now you can do partial scope. Or sorry, you would do partial like that. So there's a backwards compatible migration to this call expression syntax. But again, we're not going to get rid of this for probably a very long time, so there's no rush. But this is all cleaned up now. CanJS over our kind of main page is cleaned up to only show what people should be doing and how people should be using it, and we started removing older ways of doing things. The next thing I did is I built this CanCrud guide with Bootstrap. Feel free to go through it. I don't know if this is going to be put into the main CanJS guides. It is pretty, it did go over pretty well. It's pretty nice. It's got a paginated, editable, sortable, filterable grid. So check that out. And then finally, while I was messing around, I made a prototype of CanCrud because nobody voted for it, so someone had to do something about it. The idea behind CanCrud here is you can just give, so let me show that page. Essentially, here's I have a demo, or I call it my app, my demo, and all I'm going to do is make a to-do model and pass that to CanCrud. And then CanCrud builds all of this interface, like an editable, so it's slow because I set the fixture delay to like a second so I can make sure things were happening. An editable and a grid, an editable grid essentially, and a create widget. So that's really cool that you can get all this functionality. Maybe as a topic, I'd like to talk about, should I just make this use Bootstrap so it looks nice? But that's it for me. So Matthew, you want to talk about those bug fixes?
Yes, I do. I'm interested in CanCrud too. That one I think is really cool. So there's a couple of, so I've been upgrading Bitballs to DoneJS 3 and ran into a couple of StealClone bugs because it uses StealClone in some of its tests. These are both, I would say, getting into the, for lack of a better term, uglier parts of some of our code. So it's not necessarily pretty, but still somewhat interesting. So StealClone, what StealClone does is, well, if you haven't used it before, maybe I should show off the API real quick. .com API StealClone. What StealClone does is it provides a way to do dependency injection for testing purposes primarily. You can say you want to clone you clone the loader, the module loader, Steal's module loader, and I want to provide a mock for B. B is a module with a default, and it's going to return this. And now I can import A, which uses B, and it will, have my mock. So that's kind of the idea, is that you want to mock dependencies to kind of test how things happen, how things change when you change the dependent modules. So how this works under the hood is it clones the loader. So there's a standard method for cloning the loader, which I assume this uses. I didn't check. It does, but it also needs to clone all the configuration within the loader. So the loader has a lot of different stuff that's configured, and some of that's kind of your own configuration that you provided, like metaconfig, mapconfig. But there's also configuration that it kind of builds. NPM plugin's a good example of this. NPM plugin just has a whole bunch of state that it keeps to know what's been loaded and kind of relationship between packages and that sort of thing. So there was a bug where in a tree shaken tree, which CanJS 5 supports tree shaking, in tree shaking, we keep a set of all used exports. So for each module has its different exports. We keep track of what's being used. That way we know when a new module loads, if we need to re-tree shake, basically. And we do that using a set, which is a newer feature. StealClone did not support, when it does its cloning, it just has this terrible function that kind of checks a type of stuff and then, basically clones an array and that kind of thing. It didn't have any support for sets, so what wound up happening is it would fall through to this object cloning, and we would get an object instead of a set. And when some tree shaking code called set.has, well, the has doesn't exist because it's not actually a set. Anyways, it's pretty simple to clone a set. It's actually simpler than this. If you can actually just pass the set into the set constructor, but I11 doesn't support that method, so you have to do the for each. So that fixed that bug. Another StealClone bug was in CanFixture. Well, I guess maybe technically the bug was not with StealClone, but it was with the fact that CanFixture was being cloned. And again, this is another thing where we do kind of some weird stuff. I don't know the reason why it does this, but CanXHR or CanFixture has a XHR polyfill mocking aspect to it. And one thing it does is it checks all the properties in the real XHR, and it copies those over into its kind of fake XHR thing. In the case of when CanFixture still is cloned, there's actually two of them. There's two versions of CanFixture floating around, I guess you would say. So it winds up copying properties from the XHR, the mock XHR, into a new mock XHR. I know that sounds confusing, but what winded up happening is this underscore XHR property wind up. There's object defined property here somewhere. Try to be quick on this, but this will wind up in a max call stack because we would try to go to this, which would go over to the other ones, and so you just wind up with this max call stack thing, which is awful. So the way they fixed this was, and maybe there's possibly a better way, but I just made it non-enumerable. That way, when we do our copying, we don't wind up copying these special properties.
Do you need like a teardown then?
So there is a teardown. Well, wait a second. There's a teardown for live reload, but there's not one for cloning. Perhaps we do. I'd have to think about that. Do you want global state to stay around when something is cloned? I'm not sure. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's like what? Yeah, that like if you have a stateful thing, which CanFixture is, it gets cloned. I don't know what should happen.
Yeah, that's exactly. I kind of thought. So my first thought to fix this was I was going to like set some property that's like, hey, you've already done this. Like, don't do this again. But I didn't do that, and I want to go in this method because it seemed a little bit more cleaner. It's like, yeah, you have like several layers of fake XHRs, but it kind of works. I don't know. But yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, that's it. StealClone, a little bit better.
So to reiterate, use StealClone only for testing. It has some weird edge cases we haven't even thought about.
Yeah, I don't even know why you would use it outside of testing, but
should.
It definitely does, yeah.
Cool. Am I next?
Yeah, you're next, Kevin.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to show off a couple of new components that are in the DevTools Components project. Let me share my screen. So this first one is this JSON tree editor. I've shown this off a couple of times already, but basically we worked on polishing it up. So I worked with Ryan, one of our incredible designers, to get some styles and some UX put into this. So this is basically just responsible for editing JSON. So you've got this raw JSON here. This is the demo page for this component. And then down here, we've got the editor. So got these nice animations now. Everything is looking nice. So yeah, you can use this to edit some JSON. So the biggest thing, like I said, I worked on was styling and UX. And then I also spent some time rewriting a lot of this code to use the new value property definition. So I can show that off a little bit. And it turned out really nice. It actually makes this code very easy to read and easy to write tests for. So for things like the displayed options, so these are the options over here. These little plus and minus, you can use these to add and remove nodes. So these obviously happen when you show things. So the tests for this are really easy. Basically, we have a bunch of functions down here that are just dispatching these events. And then all of these other properties, the stateful or the derived values here, are just listening on those and using, doing whatever they need to do. So it makes these tests really easy to write. So you can basically dispatch an event and see what's happening. So for some of these that are a little bit more complicated, so for like the expanded keys, so this basically is a list of things that should be expanded. So basically this dropdown now name is expanded. And we want to do things like if you add a new item to an array, we want to expand the array, and we also want to expand the new object. So handling that kind of logic becomes a lot easier when you have the code written this way. You can see that we're listening on this add child event and adding the parent or the adding that key. So like you would say add child array.0 or whatever, and it would expand both array and also array.0, and it really puts that logic in the inside of the property that it's related to. And then the second component is the actual ViewModel Editor. So this is kind of this, it's sort of the same thing. It's using that JSON tree editor, but it's wrapping it in order to actually allow you to edit a view model for a component. So in this demo page, we've got the actual component here, and then the ViewModel Editor down below. So this does a lot of the same stuff, but it also has to deal with patching. So for example, if you make a change in the JSON editor, but you don't save it, and then you make a change up in the actual ViewModel editor, that causes that to change. And then I click save, and we can see what was actually changed by the JSON editor and apply only those patches to your view model. So this should fix a lot of the problems we have now with like overwriting promises and setting things that only have getters and stuff like that. Now we're only going to update the properties that were actually changed by the JSON editor. So you can still do something like this is a derived property. If you change this here, you're still going to get an error in your saying that you can't actually set this name because it's a getter. But hopefully you should understand your view model, and you can not change things that can't be changed. So yeah, that's it. There's a little bit left to do. There's a couple of small UX things that still need to be fixed up. You can't really, right now, you can't add properties at the top level. If your top level view model is an object, there's no way to add properties. So I need to fix that up. And then there's a couple other really small things, but hopefully this should be done today and should land inside of the actual DevTools probably early next week, maybe later today if I can get it done.
Awesome. And it handles promises?
Well, it doesn't handle promises, but it won't try to set promises, so it won't throw errors like the current one does.
Yeah, it doesn't freak out.
Yeah.
It doesn't handle them.
Well, like you can't change the value that a promise resolved.
Oh, for sure. But can you see it?
I don't know.
So are you using canReflect has own key or like?
So yeah, it was already using that.
Because I think Sheriff added the special keys to promises. So if it's looping through promises, you should be able to like click a promise, see like this, the virtual properties at least. That
should work already if you're using the version of CanJS that supports that, because that's all done on the injected script side, so the side that's actually running in your app. So if that's supported, the current JSON editor should already show that stuff.
Okay, cool.
But I haven't tried it, so.
It'd be cool. Awesome. All right, Sheriff.
Yes.
IE.
Yeah. So for the I11 stuff. We started with the infrastructure packages, and the checked packages in this list, in this comment, are already released, and those are the base and the foundation for CanJS packages. And we have faced some challenges for those fixes. And the first one, and the first obvious one, is the use of the object assign, which is not supported by I11. So for this, I use the CanAssign module to.
Sure. Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah. Sorry.
That's good.
Thank you. So as I was talking, this comment listed the released packages and the fixed and the released packages for CanJS, and this is the foundation of other CanJS packages. And this diff show us, for example, for the CanReflect dependencies, how the first obvious issue was fixed, which is the object assign, the use of the object assign, which is not supported by I11. And then instead of object assign, now we use the can assign package to replace or to fix the issue. And the other one was the use of the contains, the use of, let me find where is the fix, or we can talk now about the use of the set or weak map object. For this notation, this notation is not supported by I11, and instead of passing iterator to the constructor of set, we can instantiate this set without iterator and use the add method to push or to add items to the set. And this is how the set object should be used in I11. Other challenge is the use of the contain or contains function with the document. I11 doesn't seek with document as a node, or it doesn't support contain, the function contains in document. So we, with the help of Justin, the function contains was implemented in CanView Live to fix it. And instead of doing this in the owner node, now we are using our contains function to fix the issue. And also the other challenge was with the events, because we cannot instantiate the event with the constructor. Now we use the especially in tests, we use the old school.
Does CamDon events have a dispatch method that you could use for that?
Can bind.
But then this test would be testing both DOM events and event listener. I mean, you'd be testing using the module to test itself.
Yeah.
I guess. I mean,
yeah.
I think that's all right, though. I don't know. I mean, I guess definitely everywhere else that we're dispatching, you should be using that for sure.
Yeah.
So
like there's other places that, like CanStash bindings in particular, has a lot of like firing off events. We should make sure that dispatch. I think there are actually. It looks like there is a util create event that already does that.
Okay, so and this can guarantee the isolating the test.
Say that again.
And the test we're using the test because here I think the goal was to isolate the test for dispatching things, and if we use the other package, maybe it will not be isolated.
Yeah, I think for this test, we're testing DOM events and event listener. We need to do it this way, but for other tests that are dispatching events, we can use DOM events to dispatch.
Yeah. Okay. So here, instead of instantiating the event with the new or with the constructor, we did the old school fashion with document create event, and we initialize the event with the event type, and like this we are able to test how the events are dispatched. This is another challenge with the fix of IE, and yesterday I faced another, which is how to replace the tests for the templates with the ES6 template literal, and also we use another old-fashioned for strings for templating and testing things, as you can see in those diffs.
So does that one mean our JS hint is not set up correctly? Because it allowed that, like ES6?
Possibly. Or someone snuck in, yeah, presumably.
Okay.
Cool. All right, Sheriff, are there any other like big surprising things that you found?
Surprising things, yes, is with the tests, where some tests I11 needs to have the element and the document body to dispatch events or to query instead of doing the things programmatically. So it needs to have the element appended in the document tree. Yeah.
Interesting.
Not like other. This is the first surprising thing I faced. Yeah.
Cool.
I think one not surprising thing is that cross-browser testing is really slow in Algeria. If you try, like Sauce Labs doesn't even work. It completely blocks everything. Yeah. And browser stack just takes forever because of the network latency. Yeah. So
it's forever to work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thomas, you want to go over what documentation you've, or thank you, Sheriff. You want to go over Thomas, you want to go over the documentation you've been working on?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. So, as you said, just continuing down the road of documentation, we actually did quite a few this week. The main thing that we're focusing on is trying to get a minimum viable product where everything at least includes...
Are you wanting to share your screen?
Where everything includes nice parameters, a return response, at least one signature, and use cases if necessary.
Yeah. So what docs have you improved?
Over the past 2 weeks, can query logic was published. After a while, can fixture just missed the latest CanJS release, but it is up there. Can route currently has a PRN waiting to be reviewed. And
before this, you had done the can define. Those have been well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we talked about that in the last contributors meeting. So can define list, and can define map. Can value was also recently published. I don't seem to have the latest version locally. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. We're just trying to get it up to this sort of standard where everything has a description, signature, parameters, is linked correctly, etc. and so forth.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a grind, but it's definitely worth it for our users.
I definitely think so.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Okay, so now we're on to topics. I want to talk about the time-traveling debugging proposal, the importing proposal I made, and then also a little bit about Crud's design. Does anybody else have a topic we wanted to discuss?
Something I just thought of. We should talk about how we can automate what Thomas is doing so that the next person that comes and updates docs doesn't just make everything inconsistent again.
Automate what in particular?
So like you said, making sure all of our params have good names and the returns exists, making sure some way of, I don't know, linting or something to make sure that those things stay that way.
Document linter.
Yeah, I don't know how that would.
Just seems like he's doing a ton of work, and I don't want it to just like go out the window the next time someone else touches the docs.
Well, I mean, it's not like people are going to delete his docs, right? It's more like we just have to have the process of when we do something to make sure that the docs have to be completed and reviewed. I don't know, like other than switching to something like TypeScript, how could you know? I mean, maybe we could have it for like functions, but it's like, I don't know, maybe they don't document all their params. Like it's impossible to infer that from JavaScript code unless you have like, you know, some, you know, that's a big engineering effort.
Yeah.
I mean, we could, maybe we could look for other documentation engines that do support it, or to figure out how to build it ourselves. That's just, it's tricky unless you have like a well-known surface.
Right.
Know your APIs. I mean, we do actually. BitDocs does infer a little bit, like, but it's only when it's inline comments does it like know that. Does it know like, oh, the function has these parameters, right? It can know like, oh, this function has these 6 parameters. But we've actually begun moving all of our documentation out into Markdown files.
Yeah.
It's possible maybe we could still do some static analysis to like, well, this function is this, but you know, I'd want something that can just give us that kind of static analysis than like TypeScript. If that was like, I don't know if you have other ideas how to make it happen.
No, I don't really.
That's fine. It's a good idea.
It might be worth bringing up that Elixir uses the tests that you write to generate documentation.
Yeah, I've seen those things. I like that idea conceptually. Don't know how I feel about it practically. I don't know. It's worth an experiment, I think, if we wanted to do it on like something on the side. But I don't know. I think all docs just needs to be reviewed at this point before it goes out. I mean, I just made the stash stuff. Someone should review that. They should do it once I've got it all done. But we just need that as part of our process. Someone else should reread everything.
Yeah, and we need like our standards written down somewhere.
They are a little bit.
Yeah.
Improved, but there is a page in CanJS.com that like talks about how to write a description, how to write the signature part, that kind of thing.
Okay, maybe we should make sure that that has all the stuff that Thomas is doing. So it's
Yeah.
like, make sure the return looks good, whatever.
Yeah. Cool. Any other topics? All right, then I will talk about CanCrud. I'll do the most bike-sheddy one first. The CanCrud design. Should I or shouldn't I use Bootstrap? Like, how should I solve the styling problem?
Well, I would say don't use Bootstrap.
Okay. Well, let me argue for why I want to use Bootstrap then. I want to use Bootstrap just mostly because it'll look nice. And in a lot of ways, this is for a demo. And then I'm not going to import Bootstrap, to be clear, but I would add all of the right class names so that if Bootstrap was imported, it would just look good. And then people could mock the same Bootstrap class names if they wanted, and then they could style the grid however they wanted. Still don't think I should style it?
No, I think you should. I'm not saying you should style it. Could you get like a designer to give it a style? I guess it makes sense if other people are using Bootstrap anyways, that it would just work with that. I guess that's the plus of doing it.
Yeah, and Bootstrap is just like, I don't have to have a custom design by a designer.
Yeah, but you have to, you have to like have 1,000 wrapper divs for all their columns and stuff, I think.
Yes, there is a lot
kind of an antiquated grid style and stuff.
Well, they do have, they've gotten a little bit better with 4 because they do use Flexbox some places that you can opt into. But it's definitely heavier for sure in the markup.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's what users would care about. To me, I think that like the purpose for CanCrud is not that like it's just you want something that just shows up and works. That you're not going to be adding a lot of custom styles to it. If you are, you're probably going to end up eventually replacing it anyways. I don't know.
Well, then do it.
Yeah,
What's the goal of CanCrud? Like, what's this long term? How do you see it being used?
Well, what I want is that each individual part, well, there's one other thing I want to add to it, which is like a little query, like a CanCrud query, which can build like pagination and sorting and filtering controls for a grid, and then you can essentially use that to you can essentially wire up your grid part and your query part to talk together. That's kind of what I have to do next. The other thing I want is so that people can configure it with how to map a type to a control, so that people can, if they've got some crazy email address or whatever, and they do want to use CanCrud, they can just be like, well, I'm going to make an email address type, and here I can map email address to my email address component, and it will just show up. But like in terms of direction, I just want it to like look nice and make a cool demo for the most part. Like I want it to handle as many cases. I want to have it handle a decent amount of cases of like different types and things like that. But really, the way I was thinking about it is like, well, I've already started building my grid. I just need a little create widget. I can use that. Or I've got my create widget. I just want to see things showing up in grid. I do want it kind of independently useful. I'm not sure if this ends up as like an ecosystem project. It could. Because the styles would just be like, well, put Bootstrap on your page, and then you could use this as ecosystem. I don't know. The hardest part with actually, in terms of styles, is I'm using a modal, and that it would have to carry its own styles with it, at least somewhat, if you don't have Bootstrap. Otherwise, it's just going to like show the edit with it like under the grid, which would just be very weird. So that's kind of like, I don't know, the biggest challenge in terms of its design. anyways, any other thoughts about this? Cool. So I just want to talk about the time travel debugging a little bit. So what I was thinking is, so there's kind of different approaches to time travel, but I think the easiest one is to essentially just like record the first state change that caused that caused, like, there's not a way there. Okay, let me take a step back. There's not a great way of doing time travel debugging. I don't know if there's a perfect way of doing it in like any framework, because like no matter what, even if you're in kind of like a Redux thing where it has this giant state object, you're not going to be able to undo like an AJAX request to the server, right? So you're just limited in terms of like your capacity to do certain types of undo certain types of things. The simplest approach to me is in CanJS, you a lot of times have you have one state change that cascades like to a million other things. And we, because of the queues system, understand those subsequent changes, and we can trace those. And essentially, we would just figure out the first causes and rewind them. We might be able to detect like subsequent causes that were not rolled back correctly, but all of them should be if they're derived in the right way. Basically, my question is do we, well, hopefully, I don't know if people understand what I'm saying, but basically, there's like, the way I think it is, there's like macroscopic and microscopic stateful changes. And we would roll back the macroscopic ones and assume the microscopic ones would roll back themselves. So if I change like a person's name from Justin to Matthew or something, we would roll that back, and we would expect then all of the derived changes, all of the computes and things like that, and the HTML, all of that stuff would update correctly as a result of reversing that state change. Now, obviously, that can't be 100% true because of things like, the value behavior cannot roll back correctly.
I mean, that's one place, but if you're just using closures, that can't really roll back.
Well, you don't do that too much in.
We're doing the value helper, someone else. The value is what I was thinking of, where you would do that.
Yeah, in value is those kind of things are the problem. But is that enough? Essentially, we would be able to detect like things not rolling back in the scenario, but we wouldn't, or we could maybe make a hook to be like, well, this actually was rolled back. You're in part of a rollback queue essentially, so you should be trying to do something special. I have no idea what you would do in kind of like you're trying to count.
Does the value helper take a return function like connected callback does?
Yes. Would
you call that or something maybe? Not really tearing it down though.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I think it's okay to. I mean, obviously, you can't fix everything, so I think it's okay to. Yeah, I mean, you can't fix everything, so it's like, do you just not do it at all, or do you like, make an assumption that if you're using getters and stuff like that, it should be okay?
There's another approach, which is the other approach would be like, okay, we do record every single state change for every single observable. And we are able to set them all back. But the hard part for this, yeah, well, one, you're not going to be able to set back what's in the closure of like but you would be able to set its value back, which may or may not help you. But then the problem is, like, at least with how CanJS works in terms of updating the DOM, we use observations changing to listen to the DOM and update things. And we would have to somehow allow, like, well, those handlers should still run because they need to update things. And then you also have the whole lifecycle problem as well. Like, you have these components, like maybe they're inserted and removed. We need to tear down we need to unbind everything. That causes side effects. So I was thinking, like, in React, like, if you have any kind of component will mount behavior that does anything, like, how does it even handle that? It can't really. Or those get reapplied in weird ways. I don't know. I was also talking to some people who, like, set this up, and they were like, well, it's never actually helped me debug anything.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
But then at a meetup, like, that was like one of the first questions I got asked at the meetup is like, does CanJS support time travel debugging?
It makes a great demo.
Yeah, it's a cool demo.
Huh?
It's a cool demo.
Yeah. So that's why, like, do we just be like, well, yeah, we do because of this queues approach, and we could do it that way.
Well, the thing to me is more about, like, not how to do it, but like now you have to design some type of, like, you have to design some type of UI that you run your app in that has controls. Like, you have to build a whole all that stuff.
That's not too. I mean, I don't. To me, that's not too hard. You can just make a next and previous button that, like, what's it called? Debugging tools could just have, and it just, like, all it would do. It's kind of like queues. In some ways, it's like we already have the log. We have CanQueues log, and essentially we could make a really nice timeline for that. And what you could do is we could just give an undo button for the primary stateful changes, and then people could kind of manually go back and clean up anything they wanted.
Well, you have to put this in on. I don't know. Maybe I'm not following, but I don't want my production app recording every change. So this goes in can debug somehow, right?
This wouldn't be production. This would be.
I know, but if it's yes, I know it would be production. That's what I'm trying to understand. Somehow this is all inside of can debug, all this logic.
No, CanQueues.
Well, I don't want CanQueues runs in production. I don't want it.
But CanQueues already does stuff like this and just comments it out in production.
Okay.
So
I don't know if I want it running all the time in dev either. It's gonna save all state, just always, or you're not gonna enable this.
There's kind of like a minimal state it might record, or sure, maybe it gets turned on. Maybe can debug calls CanQueues like record.
So the thing that I think would be useful is if you could start with a fresh app and get it to a point in your time traveling. So, like, someone who runs into an issue in QA can send a developer whatever time travel information they need to get a fresh app to that point where they ran into the bug.
Yeah.
So, like, that's also one way we could do this time traveling is, like, we tear down the whole app, create a new app, and then run all of the changes from the beginning up to the point that you tried to time travel back to.
Of course, Sin is going to be 1,000 times better at something like this. Generic could do the exact same thing, but generically. But you know what I mean?
Well, maybe there's still timing things that you could run into where Sin might not reproduce it exactly like this could. Perhaps
that might be hard. You might need, like, zones to actually handle timing things really well, because if you had to wait till the response on the AJAX request can't, like, because again, you could still be doing weird stateful stuff that eventually caused the error.
Is it possible that debugging APIs, not debugging APIs, sorry, the extension APIs, like, give you a way to, like, make a copy of the heap? Because if you could just make copies of the heap all the time, it would do everything, right?
Sounds like a security risk there.
Probably.
But yeah, wouldn't that kind of solve the problem if we just destroyed your whole app, created a new one, and then replayed all of the changes from the beginning? That would fix all of even the closure stuff, probably.
Yeah, except like it's just, to me, is there? It's always like the stateful DOM parts get weird. Like, okay, a user clicked a button. Do they do something in that function with that event object that we don't know, and then we're kind of in trouble. That's I mean, it just gets back to this. It's like, how close, if we just have CanQs record essentially the first reason, and every reason that everything that's going to be a first reason, which is like an observable state change, essentially, we're always going to record, and we know how to tear it down, which actually CanJS is already good at because it already has like old value, new value. So we record all of those, and we just allow people to we can either play them all back, or we can go backwards through a bunch of these changes. And if you have weird other stateful things, values, or you're making AJAX requests or whatever, well, too bad. I mean.
Yeah, I think playing them all back is going to get you a lot closer.
Yeah, but even an AJAX request, like if you had something as a result of the .then of that AJAX request, it is going to be possibly mutated twice.
Why?
Well, because we would not be able to say that that is a result of the prior queue without zones. Like, okay, I clicked a button that said go get data, or I clicked a button that made an AJAX request. Okay, first that wouldn't even be tracked, actually, that button click. If you just literally had an on-click handler say, go make AJAX request, that AJAX request, actually that case would work. It's the connected callback case that would not work, where you do on-click this.foo equals bar, and then you have connected callback, and then you're doing listen to foo, then you're making your AJAX request, and you're doing this.data promise equals your AJAX every time foo changes. What I'm saying is we would see that foo changed, and we would record that and be able to play that back, but then we would see that data promise changed, and we would try to set that. But we could be possibly setting that too fast, because this would also be setting that, and we couldn't tell that essentially, well, if we did it this way, we actually would be able to, but if we did it this way, we would not be able to.
Yeah. Because that would happen twice.
Huh?
So that would happen twice.
Yeah, that would happen twice.
Theoretically, to different things.
Huh?
Could potentially be set to different values even.
Possibly, yeah. So that's the issue. Now we could, yeah, I don't know. That's why, to me, I don't know. Anyways, that's a good discussion. Let's put a pin in that one, and then we can think about it more. Just want to get people's brains soaking in that information.
Yeah, I think we need to figure out what the goal would be. If the goal is to create a slick demo, then how close you got to get?
Yeah. Okay, so this was just there's a problem with can import that it you don't get the value synchronously, and that's definitely something we need to fix. But at the same time, it's kind of crazy, and I don't want to use scope vars anymore. I really don't, because we have the new let context that's available. So I'd like people to be able to just import into that. So I was thinking about making an import helper that could be used to for static imports. And then Matthew asked about how dynamic imports should work. We can make stuff like this work if we wanted to. I also said, like, if we wanted to just really crazy, we don't even need that. Because if we made let context inside of if or something like that, you could just let your promise equal and then just deal with the promise inside of here. I don't know if that's what we want to do, but I just want to get people's thoughts on all of this.
Well, I mean, I guess my thoughts are pretty much what I said there. I think I think you would want to have both dynamic and non-dynamic. Otherwise, why not? Just seems like it should have both. But
yeah, I mean, to me, I'm okay with solving this one later as we've kind of moved past. We're not really showing this kind of dynamic importing as much anymore in our demos. I mean, I guess I'll put it this way. I'm okay solving one of these and I'm solving this one and then waiting to solve this one. I wouldn't want like debate over what this looks like to necessarily hold up this one.
okay.
But I'm still willing to debate that. I'm still willing to talk about it.
Okay.
To me,
I would think it look exactly like that. I'm not sure where the debate is.
yeah, that's fine.
Because yeah, I don't know what else that's how handlebars looks. But anyways, that's less important to me. But we definitely have to restrict the imports to like strings. Otherwise.
Oh, I remember what the problem with this was. Is that you don't. I remember this was like you don't get the promise. How do you know the status of this loading?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. It's scope.promise maybe or something. Could do something like that.
And that's why I was just like, well, yeah.
That's how we do metadata now.
If we just have this, then this is like basically what you would write in JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, maybe we don't need some special syntax because we have everything we need.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, the bigger issue is that we should not allow the module specifier needs to be a string and not like you should be able to insert a variable into there.
Oh, sure. That can actually be statically inferred. I'm not really that worried about that.
It can be, but I'm saying if we allow people to put handlebars in there, then it would not.
No, we'll throw. Yeah, we can make it so it throws if it's not like that.
Cool.
Cool.
Are you gonna put this in stash core?
Well, I'd like to put this in. Well, it has to go in CanStash. This would have to go in CanStash StealJS, right? Or it has to go in whatever the project that does the parsing that can figure this, figure this out. Or is that in StealJS or something?
StealJS is the parser. Like the parsing would have to go there. Yeah.
Yeah. So StealJS would then be able to like pick this out.
Wait, does this? Are you thinking this gets removed from the stash? Like it's not part of the intermediate? There's no runtime. There's got to be some type of.
Well, no. What it's going to do is then make sure that the stash renderer function gets the value as part of the let context. It's kind of like what we do for template. We get the template context that we are able to write to for each render here. We would do something similar.
Can you pass stuff into the let context from the stash render? You can? Okay.
Well, we can make that happen, yes. You can act.
So yeah, it would have to be a change to stash AST and I guess still stash and done on a render.
Yeah. Yeah, this would be really nice because this is one of the, like, having to use vars. I really want to kind of already did deprecate it, and it has that problem anyway. So this is extremely useful now that we're saying like, oh, you could just export a helper. I mean, now with the changes they made to stash, you can just export stash views, import them, and then call them So that kind of makes things a lot easier to compose. We have something like this. Cool. All right, anything else? Any other topics? All right, thanks everybody. I will see you all maybe dressed up next week.
Let's do it.